What is up, everybody? This is Voth, and in this video series I'm going to be discussing the playstyles of the various factions that you're going to see in Warhammer Total War, but I'm going to discuss them in Total War terminology. So this is going to put this series more in line for people who are more experienced with Total War, but new to Warhammer. So let's get started. Okay, the first faction I'm going to discuss are the Greenskins, also known as the Orks and the Goblins. They're going to boast one of the most deep and varied rosters because they're made up of a confederation of races, mainly the Orks and the Goblins. But they also make heavy use of squigs, which for all intents and purposes are a fantasy version of war dogs, and giants. I personally like this miniature here, as it has a cow strapped to his belt for the purposes of judging size. And what fantasy roster is complete without projectile vomiting trolls who are going to make the battlefield very interesting, to say the least? Oh, and did I mention that they regenerate, so they're going to be hard as hell to kill. Fun times. Let's start talking about the unit roster now. First up is going to be infantry. Now, the infantry of the orcs and the goblins, or the greenskins collectively, are mostly going to be made up of orcs and goblins. The orcs are going to be more of a medium and, of course, heavy and very heavy infantry, as some of them pack on a lot of armor, but they're also probably going to be able to put out a substantial amount of damage. Orcs also tend towards a berserking style. A lot of them will have a skill on the tabletop version called Frenzy, which I assume correlates closely to, Total War berserking. Now, the goblins are going to function as your quintessential sacrificial screen units. They're going to be light infantry, but goblins are sort of like cockroaches. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. They can survive and thrive anywhere, and they procreate in mass like rabid bunnies. So they're going to have large numbers that you can sacrifice to the war machine over and over and over. Now, this is a unit of night goblins, and if you look closely enough, you'll see that they're wielding nets. This is going to make them fantastic at tying down and blobbing up units, just like any low-level trash infantry would be in Total War, except they have nets, which is going to make it even harder for the enemy to pull out. Now let's talk cavalry, and first up, let's look at what the orcs bring to the table. They charge into battle on the backs of boars. Now, having grown up in Texas, I can tell you firsthand that a charging boar is more terrifying than a charging horse. A horse can be adapted and trained to charge. Boars were born to charge. They have a low center of gravity that's forward. They have a huge muscular neck, and they have tusks sticking out of their face. I can imagine that the charge bonus on orcish cavalry is going to be pretty disgusting. Now, goblins like to ride into battle on the backs of wolves. I can imagine that this would be a fast and agile cavalry with lots of stamina. And if wolves are any reflection of war dogs in other Total Wars, I can imagine that when this unit gets into an enemy unit of skirmishers, it will be a slaughter. Now, goblins also have a proclivity for riding spiders, and I chose this picture because it sort of reflects their climbing ability. Spiders are supposed to be able to climb up walls, which I can imagine has a huge impact on sieges. And I would love to see them have the raider trait that allows them to capture points faster, because it would be incredible to climb up a wall, begin tearing down towers, and then open the gate with these goblin spiders. So I definitely look forward to seeing how these guys manifest in the game. Now, something that's going to be new in Warhammer is flying cavalry. Here we have an orc perched atop the back of a wyvern, which is sort of a dragon with a stinger in its tail, which I believe comes from Greek mythology. Regardless, I don't really have a basis for speculating on flying cavalry, so we're just going to have to see how that one unfolds. Now we'll discuss artillery. First up, they have their catapult trebuchet thing that they call a rock lava. Nothing spectacular about it. It shoots rocks. Typical artillery stuff. Now, they also boast allegedly one of the most accurate artilleries in the game. And why is it so accurate? Because they're shooting goblins in makeshift wingsuits, that's why. I mean, this is the medieval fantasy equivalent to guided missiles. It seems to be quite literally inspired by the World War II kamikaze, and I can't wait to see this unit on the battlefield, if for no other reason than for the lulz. Alright, next up we're going to discuss special units, which in Total War terms this constitutes things like naft throwers and war dogs that don't fit into a specific category. Now, we've already discussed things like giants and trolls, which I could imagine functioning a lot like elephants. They would have a lot of that mass that would allow them to punch through enemy lines with devastating charges, and I could also see giants being useful in sieges. Now, squigs, as I mentioned earlier, are going to function a lot like war dogs with goblin handlers, but what I failed to mention was the fact that squigs can also grow to be the size of elephants. And unlike elephants that are naturally more docile creatures, squigs are savage and rapacious. The greenskins can also field chariots of both the orcish and goblin type, and then they field this thing called a pump wagon, which is an erratic and unreliable thing that goes on a suicide charge, but apparently if it reaches the enemy lines, it's devastating. Okay, let's talk tactics now. I've looked up several competitive builds to get an idea of how the greenskins are meant to be played, and most competitive armies consist of a couple of heavy-hitting units, usually trolls or maybe a large block of black orcs or something along those lines, and then they're backed up with artillery and then a lot of chaff units. In Total War terms, a chaff unit would be some sort of screen or sacrificial screen, or a lure unit. For instance, if you were to have a unit of slingers in perpetual skirmish mode that drew in enemy infantry well away from the battle, these are examples of what a Warhammer player would call chaff. So with greenskin tactics hinging heavily on suicidal and sacrificial screens, misdirection, and lures, it's going to cause the battlefield to look like a bloody, chaotic maelstrom. But within that, it's going to sort of be the personification of the saying, meaning to my madness, because in the midst of that chaos, you're going to have to use subtlety and finesse to set up powerful counter charges, flanking attacks, and hammer and anvils to ultimately destroy your enemy's army. And because of this, I think the greenskins are going to be a lot of fun to play and very hard to master. Now I'm going to talk about greenskin culture. They appear to be nomadic, so they'll probably play like the Huns, or at the very least like the Great Migrators, where they have a possibility of eventually settling down. They don't seem to cultivate or grow anything. They seem to just survive off the land like hunter and gatherers, raiders, and pillagers. So I expect to see them roving around a lot like a horde. Now I'm hoping that the greenskins have the ability to recruit many units on a single turn, or at the very least have access to a large pool of cheap mercenaries. Otherwise it will be very difficult for them to keep up this sacrificial playstyle. Otherwise, without these things, the rampaging, frenetic horde is instead going to descend into something much more glacial than was intended. Okay, that is it for the greenskins. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe so you can catch the next videos in the series as they come out. Also, if you have a preference for the next faction you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments, because at this point, I don't have a plan. And lastly, to all you Warhammer experts out there, if you felt like I got something wrong, please let me know. Feedback is always, always appreciated. And that's it. Thanks. Bye.